Go. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Back after a little day off for Labor Day. Hope everyone had a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Special for us, this Labor Day marked our 17th anniversary of doing radio. Labor Day 2005. We kicked off with the original idea of adding some balance to the radio airwaves, talking about working class values, talking about workers' rights, pointing out where politicians get it wrong and maybe help, make lives better. Ultimately, the goal. As a labor guy, as someone who over the years has done organizing, has done some representation stuff, involved. The next step was getting more people to join and form unions to have the benefits of better wages, hours, conditions that I have enjoyed. That was the original intent. And we have grown from a single station in central Pennsylvania to now somewhere, I think we're around 40 stations across the country, plus a free speech TV show on cable, which is very popular. Very happy about that. Doing very well, better than I ever thought, ever imagined. And the reality is this is, while it's hard work, while it's a lot of work, it's something that has to be done, because I go back to those original days, those founding days of doing this program. And I've said this a million times over the years, that I watched as the lunchrooms that I was a part of, basically were just ripped apart. I watched high-priced right-wing mouthpieces invade my lunchroom. And I still remember to this day the first time I heard Limbaugh's name, and the guy who a brother Teamster, who told me that the union was holding him back, that he would make more money if the union wasn't there, it would be better. And I simply, kind of dumbfounded. And, amazingly, in the right response for the right moment, said, if that's true, why are you here? If there is something better out there, if there are better wages, hours, conditions, better opportunities, why are you still here? And that's been the curious thing, because I hear union members say this all the time. If we just didn't have this stinking union, it's because it's what they've been force-fed over all of these years. It's what they've been, it's been constantly hammered into their ears. So now they take it as, I'm sufficiently wonderful that I should be a millionaire. And look, I would love if everybody was a millionaire. Not going to happen. Not right now. And, right-wing talk radio, grievance radio, outrage radio that plays on people's anger, their fear, their frustrations. That's what's ripped us apart. And I've had a front row seat over all these years of my lunchroom being torn from being a unified place where workers' issues were agreed on, to being ripped apart, to now indoctrinated into this Trump fantasy death cult. And now more than ever, and unfortunately, I have a lot of communications with listeners, and thank you for the people who reach out to us. Now more than ever, we need to be talking about the things that we can agree on, and workers' rights should be that thing. Workers' rights should be that thing that pulls us back together. Because more than ever, I hear people saying, look, I'm working harder, I'm working longer. Things are getting harder. Things are getting more difficult to navigate. Life's getting much more complicated. And I think a lot of it is we complicate this ourselves, because we've got politicians. And this is where the understanding of, and I go back to, and I say this all the time, I go back to my high school civics teacher, who was very clear: government decides who gets what. And when you think about it in that frame, government decides who gets what. Our government decides who the winners and losers are through policy, through the legislative choices that we make, through the executive orders that are made, decide who gets what. And for a very long time. Think, Reagan era forward. The wealth class of this country has gotten everything they've wanted. Massive tax breaks, deregulation, all of the things that built a solid, prosperous working class has been eviscerated. And through all of these right-wing bloviators, they have made it sound like this is in our best interest. If we give the wealthy all the money and all the breaks, it'll trickle down on us, and some of it will flow upon our heads. It never happens. And we're sold these ideas, privatizing our water and our sewers and our parking garages and our turnpikes and our, you name it. Privatizing, our nursing homes and our hospitals, and privatizing all of the things that used to be and had been built as the commons in this country has been privatized, profitized, and, well, rationed. And we're told that that's somehow good for us. And we were sold this idea that if we give it to the wealthy, we give it to the corporate interests, they're smart. They're going to know how to run it more efficiently. It's going to be better. It's going to be cheaper. It's going to be utopia. We're going to get better services, cheaper, and it's going to be great. And none of that ever works, does it? It seems like we're being sold snake oil over and over and over again. And the right-wing outrage machine, they never back up. They never apologize. They never talk about the failures. And this is what Reaganomics, supply-side voodoo Reaganomics, has brought us. So all these years later, again, I think back to 17 years ago when we started this program. And the first interview I did alone was with then Congressman Bernie Sanders, talking about these very issues. How do we ensure that the working class gets a fair shake? How do we ensure that workers who work hard, play by the rules, actually get ahead? This is one of those moments. But there's so much time, energy, money invested into keeping us pitted against each other and divided, especially on this stuff, that we're doomed. And I look at Labor Day weekend, the fact that someone like Doug Mastriano, who is a state senator here in Pennsylvania, was at the January 6th insurrection, held a kangaroo court hearing not far from where I sit in Gettysburg. Of course, nobody under oath, didn't swear on that Bible they loved so much, told a bunch of BS. He showed up reportedly to a Labor Day event. This is a guy who has said he will sign right to work. This is a guy who has said he will attack the ability of working people to join and form unions. This is a guy who's against the minimum wage. You go down the list of all of the things that he is against, that working people should be on the side of, and it's really quite amazing. This guy is probably one of the most dangerous candidates in the country, and to have the audacity to show up on the workers' holiday is kind of remarkable. But it shows that there's no bottom here. There's no shame in these people. There's no backing up. And the only thing that they understand is pure unadulterated power and control. And the sad reality is that there are so many working people who see that kind of appearance of the fighter, the tough guy, as something positive, without understanding that the fight is against them. The bullying is going to be them. I mean, for right now, it may be the people that you hate that they're focused on first. I mean, he did dress up in his Confederate costume. It wasn't even Halloween, and he was dancing around in his Confederate soldier uniform. But eventually they're coming for you. And I talk to my union buddies. Reality is, while he may hate the same people that you hate, while he may want to intimidate and bully the same people that you want to intimidate and bully, you're on the list too. Because once they pass that no rights at work agenda that they want, the right to work for less legislation, once that happens here in Pennsylvania, we know what happens in states that do that. Wages go down, benefits go away, working conditions get worse. For the working people of this state, life will get worse. The standard of living will continue to go in the negative direction. And that's what conservative policy has brought us. It's that simple. And it doesn't just end there. They want every part of your life controlled. And now remember, these are the people saying, Joe Biden and the Democrats, they blah, 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 blah. But if you listen to what they're saying, you listen to the words coming out of their mouth. For instance, today you've got the Massachusetts primaries going on. The ringing endorsement by Donald Trump of this Jeff Deal guy. He says, Jeff's a proven fighter who successfully pushes back on the ultra-liberal extremists and who has driven them a bit too wild, too, because they can't figure him out. He'll rule your state with an iron fist, and he'll do what has to be done. And you go, what does that mean? And who is it meant for? It's meant for working people. That's you. That's me. That's all of us. Because eventually we're all in the Shark Tank. But that's the reality. But for all the folks who sent well wishes and congratulations, 17 years, kind of an accomplishment. Very happy about that. Hoping to add another year to that here in the coming year of being able to come on and talk to everybody and interact. I'm looking forward to it. Love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Also, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you've got a question, thought, comment, want to hear it. Again, miss any of the program, podcast, grab that. Gonna take a quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Make sure you check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. We're going to go to Christopher on, line 3, I guess. Chris, how are you today?
Good, Rick. How are you tonight?
Living the dream. What's on your mind, brother?
Not just congratulations, 17 years. That's a big accomplishment. I was off a couple of weeks, but I am a Teamster, 705, and I am pro-union. And I support Donald Trump, but I think we can agree on the union movement. I'm 100% pro-union.
Okay, so let me stop you here then. Donald Trump has said, and he's on record saying he's all in favor of right to work. How do you square that?
I mean, I'm conflicted on right to work for sure. I mean, I don't have all the answers on any of these issues, but the thing I want to say was
this isn't one of those I have all the answers, Christopher. This is it's going to make your union weaker. It's going to make your ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions much weaker. It's going to divide your workplace in a much worse way. And we know, because we've seen states that have done this, it makes wages go down, conditions get worse, health and retirement security go away. This is a real problem. This, for me, is the central tenet of why I have a problem with Republicans in this moment. I wish there were pro-labor Republicans again. There just aren't.
Okay. Like, if you understand the history of Teamsters,
I do.
There was murders, There was murders. There was fights, fires, burnings. I mean, look at the movie Hoffa.
It's not just not the Teamsters, though. Let's not just say the Teamsters.
I'm just saying, in general, unions had to fight and claw for everything they got, and I think that a lot of the American labor movement has become soft and just say that they deserve it, and they don't really have to fight. I work for UPS. I'm like, why is not Amazon being organized? Why is not FedEx organized? Why isn't the union going out and doing these things? I don't understand.
You do know that they are working on that. You do realize that our labor laws are so ossificated and broken that it's almost impossible in this day to do that, especially when you're talking about how much time, energy, money, and effort's gone into pushing an anti-union message. I mean, look, when you've got 71% of the population who thinks unions are a good thing and have this approval, you got 60 million people who would vote to join a union tomorrow, but yet you've got Starbucks workers and you've got Amazon workers who are probably not going to get a contract in the next 10 years, given how broken our laws are.
Walk off the job. Amazon workers have all the power. It's like that Ants movie. Once they realize we outnumber them, we're screwed. Walk off the job. You have to put in the hard work and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. That's what the unions did back in the day. It wasn't like nobody was giving them money. Those people were starving, but they stayed on that picket line till the end, until they got what we wanted.
No, we don't disagree on this, Christopher, at all.
That's why I say we can agree on these things, Rick. And like I said, if Amazon puts a picket line out, UPS trucks are not crossing that picket line. So, I mean, the power is there. You just have to seize it and realize that we outnumber those like you say. I mean, look at Jeff Bezos, right? He owns the Washington Post, right? So, in my opinion, he puts out all this liberal stuff. Yeah, he's pro this, but then he screws over his workers. So it's like, but the Democratic Party won't call him out because
they've called him out.
I don't understand it.
They've called him out. And
enough?
No, it's never enough. It's never going to, for you and me, it's never going to be enough, Christopher, ever.
So why? Why do they not do it? Money. It's always about money, right? And
again,
whether you're Republican or Democrat, they take the money.
Yep, there you go.
That's just
good
the
point.
reality of it.
I agree with you, Christopher. I appreciate the call. I got to move along. Let's move over to Alice on line 2. Alice, how are we doing today? Alice, you there?
I'm here.
What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say that I thought it was whether amazing that all of these Republicans all of a sudden are cutting back on some of their anti-union rhetoric and scrubbing their websites of all their being supported by Donald Trump and being against abortion.
It is interesting, isn't it?
It is indeed, and I think that some of them are thinking that there's some things they best keep to themselves until they get, elected.
It's when they speak out loud that you find out who they are, and we should believe them. You're right.
Exactly.
Appreciate it, Alice.
Bye.
Thanks so much. No, and this is where, again, not everybody's perfect, but right now I look at the people who are the center of the Republican Party. Trouble. These are people who are anti-worker, and look, I agree with Christopher there. People should be taken to the streets. I'm all in favor of a general strike. Let's go to line 4. We got Gary from Minnesota on line 4. Gary, what's on your mind?
Oh, just a few things. Republicans, they don't believe in government for us, but they sure do for the rich. They can't give them enough. And, we never had a middle class in this country until Roosevelt's New Deal. And when they talk about privatizing, they're privatizing all the stuff the New Deal gave us. And so the middle class we had before Roosevelt was just a tiny amount of people in between. But what I called also about was, this environmental stuff. We were trying to get off of oil many years ago, and the big money and the oil money got in the way. But I called some of the Democratic candidates or senators and stuff, and I told them for the campaign we should show Trump and the other Republicans running down climate change. It didn't happen. It was a hoax and all that. And then run these ads of what's going on with the floods, hurricanes, storms, droughts, and fires and everything. How's that sound?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's going to hopefully wake people up. But look, I think on that issue, I think people are in their camps already. You're not going to get some of the diehard Republicans who are going to come along. I just don't think you're going to.
Well, I'll tell you, some of them are probably waking up a little bit down there in the flooded southeast where so many Republicans get elected. But we'll see. Good. So I just thought that might be a good idea.
No, it's a great idea, Gary. Appreciate the call, man. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Look, at the end of the day, the more we talk about issues, the more we focus on moving forward and making lives better, the better I think we are going to be, and holding both sides accountable. As I said, I remember a time where there were Republicans who were pro-labor. In fact, we have one on the show quite often. My friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney, was the chairman of the Oversight Committee. He was one of the Gingrich Contract on America folks, and we agreed on some things and disagreed on most others. But he was solidly a pro-union, pro-worker Republican. They're gone. This idea that they exist, not happening. Let's get Nick on line one, on the line here before we take a break. Nick, what's on your mind, brother?
Hey, Rick. Yeah, definitely a lot on my mind. Whether it's the student loan debt cancellation that debtors won of 10 to 20,000 depending on things, and the annoyance of means testing when it comes to it, and having folks have to apply to it, or it's the win of folks like us with the Bucks Cancel Lunch Debt Coalition to get like $20,000 of lunch debt in a Bucks County school district. It's pretty awesome. Both of those things are on my mind. So.
No, good stuff. I think the debt cancellation is something that is a step in the right direction. I got some problems with it. I think it should have been more. I think we should have done more to fix the problem down the road. I would have liked to have seen, something bigger. But this is again a step in the right direction. I know that a lot of people losing their minds, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I can definitely see that and agree, and I also see it as something where it's it's really showcasing that Biden does have the power to actually cancel all student debt, as something like myself or those within the debt collective or other groups have been saying for a while in that case. And then also with the lunch debt thing, almost the same thing, that school districts, they do have the power to just cancel this lunch debt, and something in which over the pandemic it was actually pretty much free for every single kid throughout the United States. So continuing that fight, and hopeful more folks continue with that.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Nick. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Good update. Again, it comes back down to policy for me. Comes down to I don't have the hat. I didn't buy the shirt. I'm not on a team right now. If there were a pro-union Republican who was on the right side on issues, I would support them. There just hasn't been one. And if there is one, and I always ask this, if there's a Republican out there who is pro-worker, I want to know. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Let us know, by all means, because it's kind of like, where's Waldo? I think it's like finding the golden unicorn that's going to be laying golden eggs. I don't think you're finding one. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that became known as Bloody Thursday. 7 striking workers were shot dead and another 30 wounded at the Jacola Mill in Honapath, South Carolina. The Great Textile Strike of 1934 had started on September 1st. The 22-day strike spanned the eastern United States from New England to Georgia and involved close to 500,000 workers. The main issue was the dreaded stretch-out, increased workloads at the same or even reduced pay rates. Striking textile workers implemented the flying picket squad tactic employed by Minneapolis Teamsters earlier that summer. Hundreds drove from mill to prevent scabbing. Mill executives across the Piedmont were stunned and terrified at the strike's effectiveness and the workers' militancy. Strikers at the Chicola Mill had formed solid picket lines at the gate when scabs and special deputies armed by the mill owners opened fire. All 7 were shot in the back as they tried to escape the hail of bullets. According to a New York Times article the following day, the killings marked, quote, the beginning of the second bloody phase of the strike as one town after another reported completion of preparations to resist the flying squads and the picketing activity of the strikers. Frank Beecham, the grandson of Chicola Mill owner and mayor of Hona Path Dan Beecham, has worked to unearth the history of the massacre and apologize for his grandfather's cruelty. He notes that, as in many southern mill towns, after the strike went down to defeat, those who struck were fired and blacklisted. Those who retained their jobs essentially took a vow of silence, never to discuss the strike or the massacre again.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
For more than a year, America's corporate chieftains have been moaning about the Great Resignation, the recent phenomena of workers just up and quitting their jobs. And now comes quiet quitting. Workers who don't leave their jobs but only do what they're hired to do, quietly rejecting the endless extra unpaid tasks and weekend assignments that bosses try to pile on. What's at work in the heads of all these workers? Simple, barked one boss way back in 1894. Nobody wants to work. And here's an anti-New Deal baron in 1940 snorting that trouble is everybody is on relief or a pension. Nobody wants to work. Then in 52 came the same refrain. Everybody is, quote, too damn lazy and nobody wants to work anymore. Year after year, the exact same wail is repeated from on high, including this group gripe expressed in a corporate survey this year. 1 in 5 executive leaders agree that no one wants to work. Given the historic continuum of executive suite disdain for working stiffs, it's no surprise that the top dogs are blaming sluggish workers for today's rampant job dissatisfaction. But it's both hilarious and pathetic that high-dollar bosses are so inept at employee relations that they can't keep the rank and file on the job, much less happy. Their response has been to put a silly Band-Aid on this serious problem. They've created new executive positions like Chief People Officer and hired consulting firms with such names as Woohoo and Happy Limited to come up with treats, trinkets, and gimmicks trying to make the workplace a playscape. Beer tastings, ping pong games, meditation, a Lizzo concert, company water bottles, wine Wednesdays. This is Jim Hightower saying, memo to CEOs, try decent pay and benefits, rational scheduling, meaningful goals, and personal respect. In a word, dignity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some good news. You know, I've been a little concerned, little worried that the Biden administration would succumb to the pressure put on by the right to do away with the tariffs. And it's not just folks on the right. I mean, there's some folks on the left too screaming about we've got to get rid of the tariffs to lower inflation, even though I don't think that would really have anything to do with it. But the good news is the Biden administration, they're going to keep the tariffs on the Chinese imports, at least for now, and that is a good thing. And here to share some thoughts on why that's a good thing, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it is good to be with you as always.
So this is a good thing, right?
Yeah, it's a good thing, and you teed it up perfectly. I mean, this would have been an easy policy for Biden to have discarded because it was a Trump policy. It was unpopular with economists and with editorial boards and with the corporate Democrats, and it would have been popular with some Republicans who didn't agree with Trump on trade policy. But we argued all along, I think correctly, that while the tariffs are a blunt instrument, they're necessary, and they're one of the best tools we have to manage the unfair trade relationship that we have with China, and the rationale for putting them into place, the fact that there's been massive unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft, and the way in which products are made is something that most Americans, if they saw the process, would not want to support. So the rationale was there, and China was asked to do a couple of things, and they didn't do it, and the CCP didn't do it, and so Biden's kept them in place. I mean, we were one of dozens of associations and domestic businesses and unions that urged the administration to continue these tariffs, which are on about $300 billion worth of imports coming from China. And Rick, it's not just doing tariffs for the sake of tariffs. I mean, there has been some evidence that the tariffs, in some ways, are working.
Right.
They're diversifying supply chains. Some of them are moving to other countries. Some of them are coming back to the United States, which is good. And we have seen a manufacturing boom in the United States during the Biden administration, which has been in many ways unprecedented and extraordinary, something we haven't seen for 4 or 5 decades here in the U.S.
No, it's good stuff. Now, again, the tariffs, one of the things that I agreed with the Trump administration on, my knock against it is it was a lone kind of thing. It wasn't part of a broader comprehensive plan. Are we moving toward a broader comprehensive plan to use this tool more effectively? How do you see this playing in the coming months, since they're going to leave this in place?
Yeah. Well, that is a good question. And if there was an easy solution to untangling ourselves with the mess we got in with China, with respect to shifting so much production over there, we would have found that easy solution by now. It just doesn't exist. It's going to take hard work. I do think this administration, more than any other, is committed to starting that work. And so part of that, as you mentioned, was keeping the tariffs in place. And that provides a little room for U.S. industry to grow. But the other part, and you mentioned this as well, is to invest in our domestic manufacturing, both through supply side and demand side incentives, and using all the tools at our disposal, things like Buy America, things like investing in our infrastructure, things like making sure our clean energy future is made in America, things like ensuring that semiconductors, which are critical to so many different products, as well as our national security, that we have the capacity to make far more of those in the United States than we do right now, to prevent the kind of shortages and supply chain disruptions that we've seen over the last couple of years. So I do think that there are policies in place that there weren't before, which is helpful. And there's also evidence that some of these policies are beginning to work. We have a long way to go, but it seems like that one-way ship to China is starting to turn around a little bit,
yeah.
And that we're seeing some of this come back.
Yeah, I mean, Bloomberg reported that new construction starts have soared something like 116% over the past years. I mean, that's never been that way in my lifetime. It's always been the other direction. So to see this, impressive.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, 116%. That's the growth in construction of new factories in the United States year over year, which is an unbelievable surge. That's like something that you're surging up for to prepare for armed conflict or something like that. I mean, it is really nuts how much it has grown. And it is, again, this isn't organic. I mean, part of this is because our economy is healthier, but part of this is because we have policies in place to make sure that the next generation of things that we're making in the U.S. Or that we're deploying in the United States and that we're also researching in the United States are going to be made in the United States as well. And that's things like our electric vehicles or lithium-ion batteries or more of our solar panels. And so you've seen a ton of these new factory announcements from names that are familiar to everybody, from Ford to Intel to even foreign-owned companies like Samsung that are choosing to invest in the United States. And that means a whole lot more manufacturing jobs that are going to be open and available coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the policies, the Inflation Reduction Act. They're saying because of that, we've now got this new first solar plant going to be built, and then you
Right.
look at the infrastructure bill. The Corning plant going to be built out of that. The CHIPS Act, you're going to get this massive CHIPS facility in Columbus, Ohio, and building other places. The fact that policy is moving us in a direction to reshore our manufacturing, because I do think we're kind of in a war kind of footing coming out of the pandemic and realizing just how badly broken our supply chains are. We may not be at armed conflict, but we're kind of at a war footing, because at least I hope people are waking up that we're at a serious disadvantage as a country, given the way things are structured right now.
That's exactly right. We certainly are. And it's things that are important to our national security, like those semiconductors and other products as well. And also everyday things that we depend on, right? And we've seen this whipsaw effect that started in a lot of ways even before the pandemic with any kind of disruption, whether it was a natural disaster or even power outages that show just how fragile our supply chains are. And so I do think that a couple of things happen. One is that, some businesses, not all, Rick, but some businesses had an epiphany that said, you know what, there's a way around this, and it's actually pretty simple. You make the products where they're consumed. And in the United States, we consume 20% of the world's stuff. We overconsume. We're 5% of the world's population. We consume 20% of the world's stuff. So it's a good place to locate a factory, and you can cut out a lot of the shipping. But I think the even more important factor here is that there's now policy backing all of this. So there's a lot of presidents who would talk about made in America, or who would say, I love manufacturing. But until you get the policy right, you really aren't true blue. And I think Biden has done a great job so far.
Yeah.
Starts with infrastructure, and you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and all of that. And if you package all of that together, you have the formation of a nascent industrial policy in the United States, something, again, we haven't seen for more than a generation.
No, look, I look at someone like Trump, who for 4 years talked about Infrastructure Week almost every week. I mean, we had tons of displays and cute photo ops of him in trucks and playing with stuff, but never any real action. We had tons of talk of reshoring jobs and spreading a fantasy that he alone could bring our manufacturing back, and it never came to fruition. And yet the guy who can barely get out a sentence, and look, I love Joe Biden, not a great orator, but on policy, he's killing it.
Yeah, he is. And my hope is that he will sell this across the country, because all the work that we have done would suggest that these policies are going to be wildly popular. And there's really nothing, and I think you would agree with this. There's really nothing like an uplifting moment for a community than when a factory says it's going to locate there, right? It's kind of like a country winning the Olympics, or someone winning the lottery. In a way, it transforms that community.
Yeah, it means jobs. It means economic activity, and more importantly, it means identity. And this is part of some of the things that we've been talking about for a while. When we went through that whole 80s and 90s deindustrialization, you left communities hollow. And you look at them now, and they're broken places, abandoned with all of the negative effects of job loss and unemployment and broken families and drug abuse and all kinds of stuff, that this could help maybe begin to heal and give not just people but communities a mission again.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Rick, because the societal costs, in addition to the direct economic costs of those factory closures, were extraordinary, and they're still being felt, and they're rippling throughout society. And I'm not going to pretend like one new factory announcement is going to erase all of that and make a community whole again. But it is certainly a step on that road. But we have a lot of work ahead of this. And as exciting as the electric vehicle revolution is, and it's even more exciting when it's made in America, and we do have policies that are going to make sure that a lot of it is made in America, there's also a simple truth here, is that it's going to take fewer workers to make electric vehicles than it does the combustion engine. It's a simpler product. It doesn't have as long of a supply chain. And so we are going to have to find other markets, other products that we're able to make in the United States. And again, clean energy is a great example of that, whether it's wind turbines or solar panels or any of the other aspects of renewable energy that we're going to need and depend on coming ahead. We have to put that together. And this is also the important thing. Biden can't just say, okay, we're done now. We've done manufacturing. Let's move on to something else. This is going to take sustained effort, and it's going to take sustained trade enforcement. It's going to take more investment. I mean, the CHIPS Act for semiconductors should be the beginning of this, not the end.
Right.
Because there were a lot of other sectors out there where we don't make enough of the product, and we are still very, very vulnerable and exposed. And we need to reshore that as quickly as we possibly can.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website if you want to check out the work that they do. We'll get links out on social media. Now, here's the thing. Here's what gets me, and here's what scares me. We've talked about clean energy in the past. We're talking about manufacturing policy. We're talking about a direction that the country is moving that I think is on the right path, is moving us in a direction that's going to make people's lives better, going to help heal communities, do all this stuff. We've got elections coming up. And I look to the Republican side of things, who didn't give overwhelming support to any of this stuff. In fact, some of it didn't support at all. My mind goes back to 1980 and Reagan ripping the solar panels off the White House. And, my fear is we're doing all this good stuff. We're moving in all the right directions. And someone, I don't know, with an orange tint comes in and rips it all out from under us.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a real danger, without being partisan here, but just purely based on policy, that it could happen even sooner than that. I just read today that part of the package that Kevin McCarthy and Republicans in the House are putting together is something called the Commitment to America, as opposed to the Contract for America, right? So just rebranding it. But one of the elements of that is rolling back the Build Back Better spending, which we were just talking about, has had extraordinary benefits already for blue states, purple states, red states. So I don't think that's going to be a popular thing, but that is a danger. And if that's something that House Republicans are running on, then that's something they're going to probably try to do if they should take back the House. And so we have to be incredibly vigilant as we move ahead. And we also have to make sure that people know the elected officials who support pro-manufacturing, pro-industrial worker policies, and those who want to roll things back.
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the numbers. Bureau of Labor Statistics said, I guess over the last year, under the Biden administration, there was something like 461,000 manufacturing jobs. Yeah. That's fairly impressive.
Yeah, that's more than fairly impressive. I mean, this is the first recession, because we had the pandemic kind of induced recession, where we have added back all of the manufacturing jobs that were lost during a downturn. And not only that, we're continuing to add them. And so we're building on some of the progress that had been made from 2010 and into the early first or second year of the Trump administration. And so we're back up beyond that. And look, manufacturing isn't going to employ as many people as it did in the 70s or the 60s. There's a lot of reasons for that, globalization or automation or what have you, and the fact that we've seen a shift to services, but we can continue to grow the sector, Rick. And these policies show us, they give us the roadmap on how to do it. But it's got to be semiconductors, and then it's got to be like specialty metals, and it's got to be nanotechnologies, and it's got to be everything else that we not only want to design here and consume here, but that we want to make here as well. And I think that Biden has helped to switch the politics on this. And my hope is that, national Democrats will take heed, because for a long time, unfortunately, they didn't. And that's one of the reasons why they faced troubles, in the past.
There you go. Good stuff, Scott. As always, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Good news, heading in the right direction. Thrilled with it. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thanks so much, Rick, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Our good friend Scott Paul, the Alliance for American Manufacturing. AmericanManufacturing.org is their website. If you want to check out the incredible work they do, we'll get links out on social media. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people on the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that Jane Addams was born in Cedarville, Illinois. Her family was wealthy, and her father served as a state senator. In 1881, Jane Addams visited London with her friend Ellen Gates Starr. There, the two women were inspired by Toynbee Hall, a settlement house which worked with the poor and working class in the city. They decided to establish a similar effort in Chicago. They founded Hull House in an immigrant neighborhood of Italian, Greek, and Jewish workers. Hull House grew to become a complex of facilities that offered kindergarten, daycare, lectures, and cultural programs, and an important space for women trade unionists to hold meetings. The women of Hull House became one of the leading proponents for workplace safety in the nation, pushing for laws and reforms to help workers. During the 1894 Pullman workers' strike, Jane Addams visited the community and had meals with the women workers. She was able to convince the Workers' Strike Committee to agree to sit down to arbitration, but the Pullman Company officials staunchly refused to negotiate. The refusal of the company to bargain and the rising anger of the workers was an eye-opener for Jane. Later, she reflected, quote, "During all those dark days of the Pullman strike, the growth of class bitterness was most obvious." Before the strike, she wrote, quote, "There had been nothing in my experience that had revealed that distinct cleavage of society which a general strike, at least momentarily, affords." In 1931, Jane Addams was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her lifelong advocacy for working class women and children and her strong stand for peace during World War I.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So some good news coming out of Major League Baseball, or the Major League Baseball Players Association. They announced today that more than half of the minor leaguers who are playing in our minor leagues have signed union authorization cards, which means that they have gone to the league and to the owners of the minor league teams and said, "Hey, you can voluntarily recognize the rights of these ball players to unionize, so that they have a say, a contract, share in the wealth that their labor creates." Going to be interesting to see if the major league teams actually push for it. I could make for an interesting spring, might even make for an interesting October. But this is one of those moments where you're seeing this kind of enthusiasm around. We've had enough already. We're going to change things, and we're going to demand that we get a fair shake, that we get a fair share of what our labor creates. And seeing the minor league ball players who some of the horror stories you've heard over the years, being treated with dignity and respect going forward, I think is a good thing. To go back to something a caller said earlier, I mean, this is one of those things where I can see Major League Baseball going on strike to support their minor league brothers and sisters. I can see that. I can see a because they have the kind of power that you need to do that. I got a couple of emails from folks going, yeah, it's great to say Amazon should go on strike, but all of these problems. And look, there are all of these problems. But for me, this is that place where we should be in total agreement and moving in a direction that says, you know what, the wealth that our labor creates, we should share it. That's fairness. We should be fighting for better conditions, better life-work balance, better. We just came out of a pandemic where people were told they were heroes. They were essential. They mattered. And we're in a moment where I think, at least I hope, people don't want to go backwards. Now, our friend who works at UPS, there's lots of talk that UPS is going to strike next year because of a plethora of reasons. Part-time workers, not being paid well. In fact, one of the crummiest things that I've seen in a while, UPS, to get people, especially in my area, to come work as a part-timer there, they paid them I think it was $24 an hour to come in, even though the contract only says 14 or 15 to start as the wage for part-timers. And they brought them in at that rate and then said, oh, by the way, we're going to now, since you're no longer the hero and essential that we told you, we're going to claw that back. And now you've got those workers who are going, wait a second. We want this. And you've got workers going, these should be full-time jobs. I go back to when I was on strike back in 1994. The freight industry went on strike at the time. And what they had wanted through their contract was what UPS has, a whole bunch of dock-type people who are part-time. They wanted to flood the docks with 4-hour casuals. And we went on strike to say, no, absolutely not. This is where we draw the line. These have to be good family-sustaining union jobs with good benefits and retirement security. This is how it has to be. And we won ultimately. I want that for our UPS brothers and sisters. I want them to be able to do that as well. And it's going to be interesting. You got a new president, Sean O'Brien. It's going to be interesting to see how this moves forward. I remember the last strike that UPS was on back, I think, 97. There could be another one. And something that I'll tell you, I'll be walking a picket line with them, and I hope that you will as well, because we've got to become that society again. And we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Approval ratings are high. People have very good opinions, and there's lots of organizing going on. But we're not that society yet that looks at other people and going, yeah, you should have the right to organize. Even though I may never be in a union, you should have that right. And I think about my aunt, who, again, she's a number of years older than me, never, ever possible union member. She never was in a profession that would ever put her in, but extremely pro-union. She's the type of person who would drive by a picket line and drop off donuts or coffee or something, and has done that in the past. Because she understands that it's good for society, it's good for all of us. That when you do better, she's going to do better. That when working people do better, working people do better. And for me, that's the place where we start. That's the agreement point. Because we should at least be able to agree on that. We can fight about everything else, but that should be where we start. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours.
Small green plants lined the bed of what used to be a frontier lake between Switzerland and France. It's existed for 12,000 years, but now it's relegated to just a small stream.
More than half of Europe mired in worst drought in centuries. Climate change action is way more popular than Americans realize. Plus,
a country famed for its oil resources, committed to going to sustainable mobility.
Saudi Arabia pushes to become a global electric vehicle leader.
Really?
Yes.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There is no climate crisis. It is a hoax, and fossil fuels are a wonderful thing.
It is 2022, and that is Virginia Congressman Bob Good. Hey, Virginia voters, it's 2022. Can you please vote that guy the hell out of office? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, from heat and drought in the U.S. to heat and drought in China. Now we're back to heat and drought in Europe.
Yes, unfortunately, more than half of Europe is mired in drought. According to a new report from the European Commission, 64% of the continent is in severe or exceptional drought, the highest category, and it is the worst drought in at least 500 years, and likely more. The combination of record heat and drought has triggered water shortages across Europe and is contributing to a widespread increase in fire danger across the EU. Drought, heat, and fires are all worsened by man-made climate change.
Yep, they are.
Here in the U.S., new projections from NOAA hold a warning for coastal communities that are seeing flooding on sunny days at high tide.
You mean like Florida?
Yes.
Then I'm sure they'll ignore it.
NOAA's latest outlook predicts that sunny day flooding, which today occurs on average nationally about once every 2 months or so at any given spot, could hit as frequently as every other day by 2050. That's within the lifetime of a traditional 30-year mortgage originating today. New Jersey is crafting new regulations to restrict development in coastal flood zones based on future climate projections, not past flood data.
Good.
By 2150, sea levels in Jersey are projected to be 5 to 19 feet higher than today.
Don't tell Florida.
A disturbing new study finds that living near natural gas fracking wells increases the risk of childhood leukemia. Researchers at Yale School of Public Health found that children in Pennsylvania who grew up roughly within a mile of a fracking well are twice as likely as other young people to develop juvenile leukemia. But some good news. New modeling shows that Democrats' newly enacted landmark climate bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, will not only save consumers money and lower energy costs, but will also deliver massive benefits and cost savings for public health. By reducing fossil fuel air pollution, the law will prevent up to 4,500 premature deaths every year by 2030 and hundreds of thousands of asthma attacks, with the biggest gains in communities of color that are disproportionately burdened by industrial pollution.
Well, that is good news.
In other news, a new survey finds that climate action is far more popular than people in the U.S. realize.
Is it?
2/3 of Americans support government climate action, but everyone is underestimating how much other people support climate policies, incorrectly believing that their neighbors don't support action. The researchers found this false perception occurs across all states and demographic groups. Even Democrats don't know that climate policy is very popular.
And why don't Democrats even know that?
The researchers at Boston College partially link it to decades of right-wing media demonizing climate policy.
Go figure.
And it matters, because when people assume something isn't popular, they don't talk about it, leading to what the researchers called, quote, a spiral of silence that helps obscure the deep, widespread support for climate protection measures across the board.
Of course, they don't talk about it. They think others don't agree with them, and they're afraid to speak up about it.
Finally, big moves in electric vehicles. Saudi Arabia has launched a major initiative to become a big player in the global electric vehicle sector, investing billions to develop a domestic minerals mining industry and an EV manufacturing and processing supply chain for batteries and cars. Bloomberg News reports that the petro-state hopes other countries will swap out their dependence on Saudi oil for dependence on Saudi battery materials, a sector that China currently dominates.
Chalk me up as dubious. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Are you tired tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So last week you had the president in Philadelphia giving his spiel on, hey, we got to save democracy. And, well, immediately you got the former president going, no, Joe Biden's the enemy of the state, which is kind of interesting given the fact that, when Biden calls out the MAGA hats, you don't see them running for the doors, locking the doors in fear of being attacked. But, boy, when Trump points his finger, you got a lot of people worrying because, the fear of violence is very real and the fear of democracy under attack very real, which is why when I came across this democracy scorecard by the good folks over at Common Cause, made me go, maybe we should be talking about how bad are things? So here to share some thoughts on the most recent release of their democracy scorecard, I've asked Aaron Sherb to come talk with us. He's the Director of Legislative Affairs there at Common Cause, commoncause.org, the website. Aaron, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on tonight, Rick.
So tell me, what is the democracy scorecard? Give me the rundown.
Sure. So every 2 years, Common Cause does a scorecard to help evaluate members of Congress on usually between 15 to 18 democracy-related bills to help voters, to help constituents understand where their members of Congress stand on key democracy issues. We started this way back in 2016 during the beginning of the Trump administration. We've seen a steady increase in the number of members of Congress who have had perfect scores. Actually, this year there are 101 members of Congress with perfect scores. So really, democracy issues becoming much more salient, much more grabbing the attention of the public. And so that's exciting to see, obviously. But still, it's most of these bills, unfortunately, were filibustered by Senate Republicans. Nearly all of them enjoy majority support in Congress. So without the legislative filibuster, nearly all these bills, to help get rid of dark money in politics, to help expand and protect the freedom to vote, to help uphold the rule of law, nearly all of these would have become law if not for the filibuster.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, the filibuster, I'm told a double-edged sword, though. I mean, I have friends on both sides who are going, well, if you do away with that wonderful safeguard of the filibuster, Aaron, wait till Republicans get into control and they'll use it against you. Are we afraid of that? Personally, I'm in favor of democracy. I'm in favor of, look, if you got the votes, you move something forward, even if it's something ugly.
Yeah, I mean, Common Cause has had a longstanding position against the filibuster. I think the framers of the Constitution clearly included in there where they wanted, where a supermajority is required, whether it's ratifying treaties, whether it's convicting on impeachment. The filibuster is just kind of a fluke. It's kind of an arcane Senate rule that kind of became a standard practice in the Senate, but it's nowhere written in the Constitution. No other modern democracy has anything like it, and so it's really just stilted progress. It's blocked progress in so many different scenarios, so many different cases over the years. So. And this is yet another example. Are we prioritizing the freedom to vote? Are we prioritizing an arcane Senate rule? Are we prioritizing reproductive freedom? Or are we prioritizing an arcane Senate rule? So, at least at Common Cause, we have pretty strong opinions on what we think about the filibuster.
No, I'm in favor of a talking filibuster. I would love to return to that because I want them to talk more often. I want to hear Republicans explain to me why. We can't get, an increase in the minimum wage, why we can't have investments in healthcare and education. And if you're going to stop this stuff, contraception for women, and go down the list of all the things that have been filibustered over the years, tell me why. Not just don't show up with the phone book, but stay on topic, stay on message, and hold the floor as long as you want. To me, that's what the filibuster, I don't know, growing up, in the 70s, I remember, the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I remember that. That's what it should be like, not just someone anonymously going, I have a problem.
Yeah, and that's really the issue with the modern filibuster. It's a secret hold. You don't even have to identify yourself. It can be completely anonymous. There's no floor debate. The public can't hear the arguments on both sides of an issue or all sides of an issue. It's just you call into, it's called a cloakroom, and then you just say you object to something, and then that's the standard practice now is that anything needs 60 votes to advance. So it's just anti-majoritarian or super majoritarian threshold that needs to pass anything. And many of the policies that the filibuster has blocked are have broad bipartisan support among the public, Democratic, Republican, Independent voters. It's just the modern Republican Party, which is just so out of step with the public on so many issues.
Which is why I think most people believe that the Senate is where good ideas and progress go to die because of this rule. So is this the center of the democracy scorecard? I mean, is this the main issue of the filibuster? You said there were 18 pieces of legislation and ideas. Is this the main part of it, or what else is in there?
Yeah, so they're kind of bills and votes broken down into a couple categories. One to get big money out of politics. One to protect and strengthen the right to vote. One section of bills to increase ethics, and another section to kind of promote the rule of law and accountability. So they're broken down into kind of those four broad categories. And by and large, these provisions on these each of these issue buckets have wide bipartisan support. Common Cause and many of our allies have passed reforms to these goals at the state and local level, often with bipartisan support. But it's really at the national level. It's just complete Republican intransigence on nearly everything. And so there was one bill out of the 18 that was able to pass that had broad bipartisan support on a judicial ethics bill. But for the most part, Senate Republicans and Mitch McConnell uses as he self-declared kind of legislative graveyard that he likes to call it, has blocked nearly everything.
Yeah, and again, the things that we the people need, especially we the working people, end up getting blocked as things overwhelmingly popular that you would think should be no-brainers, not so much. And this is where again I go back to this idea of a talking filibuster would give voters the ability to go, well, maybe this guy, maybe he's not who we want in the Senate. Maybe we should be voting for other people. I think it's important. And I look at the news today. Senator Richard Burr from North Carolina, we find out, I don't know, some interesting trading behavior that should have known about for a while. This kind of accountability, I think, should be in place. This is something we should be talking about in when we're talking about democracy and your scorecard.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just protecting the freedom to vote, strengthening protecting the freedom to vote, especially nearly 2 years after the January 6th insurrection. As 19 state legislatures have passed 34 anti-voter laws in the last 2 years as a result of the former president's big lie. The freedom to vote is under attack. And we'll see this in the Supreme Court later this year in a case called Moore versus Harper and the quote unquote independent state legislature theory. To try to make it kind of harder for state legislature, or they're making it easier to gerrymander in state legislatures, making it easier to overturn elections in states. The Supreme Court's going to hear this case probably in December. And so it's yet another threat to our freedoms, to our ability to have our voices heard and votes counted, both this year and in years to come.
Yeah, I mean, it's
so the bills in the scorecard would go a long ways towards helping to protect our voices and our votes.
Now, the interesting thing to me is when I have conversation with my Republican friends, they're not opposed to these kind of sane, rational reforms, transparency, accountability, responsibility, things that the Republican Party used to be, behind. I'm not sure when that all changed, but these sound like things that would be very popular to the people. Some reason you get into that magic chamber, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, just 15 plus years ago, when the Voting Rights Act was reauthorized, it passed the Senate 98-0. And in the House, it was something like 390 to 34. Just last year, there was one congressional Republican who voted for it. Out of 200 plus Republicans in office, it's just appalling. So, Common Cause has not changed our stance. The Democratic Party hasn't changed its stance, but the Republican Party has just kind of gone off the deep end. And they used to be for voting rights. They used to be for the Voting Rights Act. Republican Party used to be for disclosure, for transparency, but now they won't even support that. The Senate's likely going to vote on the Disclose Act, to help shine a light on dark money in politics coming up in the next few weeks. Hopefully, we'd be lucky if we get one or two Senate Republicans to vote for that. And so it's really just a complete 180.
Which is crazy because, this is where, I reach out to my Republican friends and go, look, we agree money in politics has destroyed this system. And all I get from my Republican friends is George Soros. It's all about George Soros. I go, wouldn't you like to know if George Soros is really doing all these things that you seem to think he's doing? Because it seems like, George Soros is everywhere. And I've never seen him.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, conservatives and Republicans like using the talking points. They know the messaging works with the public. The message, the anti-corruption, the disclosure messaging works. But then, in terms of what solutions are they proposing? There's very little meat on the bones there, and so that's what's extremely challenging. And
there's none. I mean, look at the Republican platform. Oh, wait a second. They didn't actually have a platform in 2020. And I don't know how often you've had a presidential campaign season without a party having a platform. I don't remember. I know they're not my lifetime that I can remember. Historically, has that ever happened before?
I mean, not that I'm aware of, but it just seems like complete tribalism. If one party is in favor of something, then we're against it. So it's just it's not based on the merits. And again, transparency polls extremely well. Accountability, rule of law reforms poll extremely well. But just there's a disconnect between grassroots Republican voters and what congressional Republicans in Congress are supporting.
So now you've had, I guess it's 101 people who had perfect scores this year. Which is a huge jump from 58 back in 2020, I guess.
Yep.
So that is a huge jump. Any zeros? How many zeros did we get?
I believe there are 8 or 9 members of Congress with zeros, but not too many. Nearly all of them voted for at least one bill. But it's definitely a handful of zeros this year.
So for me, it's one thing about saying, hey, great, thanks for being 100% on side of this. You should be. For me, it's about pointing out the people who are at the bottom end of the spectrum, because maybe we can, I don't know, boost them a little bit, give them a little goose going, come on along, follow along on the path, something, maybe shame them a little. Never mind. There's no shame there.
That's partly what our scorecard is, a resource for voters. So we send it to our 1.5 million voters. We send it to national and state press to help, to help voters, to help citizens understand where their elected officials are on key democracy reform issues in Congress. And so we hope the voters will use this as a tool, throughout this year and every couple of years, so they can have a better sense of where their elected officials are and how well they're representing them or not representing them.
And if you want to find out where your congressman is, you can check out democracyscorecard.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. I highly suggest doing just that. I look at my district and my congressman. Not somebody who's on the right side of many issues. In fact, it looks like Scott Perry, as you said, a lot of people voted for just one bill, and my congressman, Scott, pardon me, Perry, just one bill.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a handful of members of Congress from Pennsylvania who just supported one bill. Conversely, there are 5 members of Congress from Pennsylvania who have perfect scores. Matt Cartwright, Congressman Mike Doyle, Congressman Dwight Evans, Congresswoman Susan Wild, and Senator Bob Casey all have perfect scores, and there are another handful of them from Pennsylvania who have near perfect scores as well. So there are definitely a lot of ones in there, but definitely that's balanced out by a number of folks with perfect or near perfect scores from Pennsylvania.
And wherever you are across the country, make sure you go to democracyscorecard.org. Find your congressperson, find out what their score is, and I don't know, maybe call them. Ask them why, because I think, last line of questioning I've got for you, Aaron, this is kind of the point, right? A little activism, a little information, and, to point out voting records, because I think a lot of this we get lost in the Fox News kind of, pie fight, but it does come down to policy, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make a kind of a clear demonstration of everybody's record on key issues, and we think the Democracy Scorecard lays that out pretty clearly for voters so they can see on how members of Congress are doing on issues that are important to them.
That's all good stuff. Aaron Sherb, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great work. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Rick, for having me on.
Anytime. Again, the website, democracyscorecard.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can also check out commoncause.org, where Aaron is the Director of Legislative Affairs. Going to take a quick break. Right back. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. We'll talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Democracy. The sad thing is, you know, and I go back to this and I talk about this often. You know, when I talk to people, even if we don't agree on issues, this is one of the things we used to agree on. That, you know, there should be a democratic process, that we want people to vote. We want everyone to vote. We want this wonderful experience, this self-rule thing, this exceptional, this idea that we can govern ourselves to play out, that everyone should have a voice, and we do that at the ballot box. And yet, interestingly enough, under assault. And what I find really kind of twisted is the people who are claiming that there's all this, you know, voter theft going on and voter fraud going on. They're the people doing it. That's the weird part of this. And I saw this story today that evidently a voting machine just kind of went up missing in Michigan. And you go, well, gee, where could that voting machine be? Evidently, somebody put it on eBay last month and sold it for $1,200. And this is the great thing about this is you go, you do realize the FBI is going to find you. You do realize that, you know, there was a money transfer. You do realize that there's a you know, an internet, you know, trail. They're going to find you eventually. It just is what it is. I got an email from Darren. Great show. Always good with Scott Paul. Ordered a book of Sherrod Brown. Seems like a good guy. Hope he runs in 24. And look, Darren, my guy. I want Sherrod Brown at the top of the ticket in 24. I think Biden's gonna. I think he's gonna go off into the sunset. With a stellar record of moving this country in the right direction with smart policy. But I think someone like Sherrod Brown could take this really to the next level and really be able to sell the idea of rebuilding manufacturing, especially in rural communities like where I live and in those places across this country where, quite frankly, they've been left behind. And all that they were given was anger and outrage and fear and smear. And this idea that it's all the Democrats' fault, it's their trade deals. When the reality is yeah, Democrats are on board. But it's the business folks, the party of big business. And the Republican Party have been that party for a very long time. My entire lifetime. They're the ones who are pushing the idea of, hey, we need to deregulate. And yeah, it was some Democrats that went along stupidly. And this is where you and me and us, we need to be be holding people accountable, where transparency matters, where something like the democracy scorecard matters. Seeing how people vote and then holding them accountable for those votes. Simple stuff. But I think Sherrod Brown, I think he could be the guy because I think he's got the ability to talk to working people that I don't think a lot of Democrats really do. And I've said for years, I think Democrats are weak on messaging. I think they're even weaker on some policy, and they don't know how to talk to working people. I think Sherrod Brown does. I think he's a guy who, when a street fight breaks out, he's going to ball up his digits and get in there and not just offer to hold someone's coat. I think the reason that a lot of working class Republican voters have gone that direction is they see the Republicans as, they're going to be the fighters, even if what the Republicans are fighting for is making their life worse. And I think about my union brothers and sisters who are pulling that lever for someone like Doug Mastriano, who has said, I'm going to sign the no rights at work legislation. That's going to make your life worse. That's going to make your ability to fight for better wages, hours, and conditions that much harder. And yet they're going to do it because they've bought in. They've bought into it. He's going to fight the people that we don't like. I go back to that. I can easily pay half the working class to murder the other half comment. Reportedly attributed to Jay Gould, the railroad magnate. It's true. The wealth class spends enormous sums of money dividing and pitting us against each other and ensuring that we never come together. But for me, and I've said this a couple of times, and I'll probably say it a million more times. So get used to it. The workplace, fighting for better wages, hours, conditions, fighting the employer who their interests are getting you to do as much work as possible for as little pay as possible, and maximizing their wealth off of your blood, sweat, and tears, and then not sharing. This is where unions sprung out of, and the history of the labor movement has been fighting back against those forces. It's a lot harder to see today. It really is. Back in the old days when you could see the mansions on the hill and you had, children literally starving in front of you, it was a little easier to see which side you were on. They're a little smarter today. Someone brought up, why don't all those Amazon workers go on strike? Well, because they've all got kids. They're all eking by. They see they're existing. And the chaos and the struggle that would come out of that is enormous. And look, I hope we get to a point to where we working people will then pitch in to help those folks to do better. I hope we become that society again. We're not there. Because you go back and you learn labor's history, the great strikes, the sit-down strikes of the 30s, communities were involved. Communities helped support the families who were working. They brought food to the people who were sitting down in those factories. This is not just on the workers. This is on all of us. It's incumbent on all of us, which is why I say all the time, when I see a picket line, and I'll pull over and I'll walk with them, even if it's for 10 minutes. Show support. Bring some water. Bring a dozen donuts, something to show support, to show that the community is behind them. Because I understand when they do better, we all do better. Seems like a simple proposition to me. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I got a couple of emails I want to get to. We'll do that after this. Again, if you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Share the podcast with your friends. Simple stuff. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. This day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that Jane Addams was born in Cedarville, Illinois. Her family was wealthy, and her father served as a state senator. In 1881, Jane Addams visited London with her friend Ellen Gate.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was the day that Jane Addams was born in Cedarville, Illinois. Her family was wealthy, and her father served as a state senator. In 1881, Jane Addams visited London with her friend Ellen Gates Starr. There, the two women were inspired by Toynbee Hall, a settlement house which worked with the poor and working class in the city. They decided to establish a similar effort in Chicago. They founded Hull House in an immigrant neighborhood of Italian, Greek, and Jewish workers. Hull House grew to become a complex of facilities that offered kindergarten, daycare, lectures, and cultural programs, and an important space for women trade unionists to hold meetings. The women of Hull House became one of the leading proponents for workplace safety in the nation, pushing for laws and reforms to help workers. During the 1894 Pullman workers' strike, Jane Addams visited the community and had meals with the women workers. She was able to convince the Workers' Strike Committee to agree to sit down to arbitration, but the Pullman Company officials staunchly refused to negotiate. The refusal of the company to bargain and the rising anger of the workers was an eye-opener for Jane. Later, she reflected, quote, "During all those dark days of the Pullman strike, the growth of class bitterness was most obvious." Before the strike, she wrote, quote, "There had been nothing in my experience that had revealed that distinct cleavage of society which a general strike, at least momentarily, affords." In 1931, Jane Addams was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her lifelong advocacy for working class women and children and her strong stand for peace during World War I.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
For more than a year, America's corporate chieftains have been moaning about the Great Resignation, the recent phenomena of workers just up and quitting their jobs. And now comes quiet quitting, workers who don't leave their jobs but only do what they're hired to do, quietly rejecting the endless extra unpaid tasks and weekend assignments that bosses try to pile on. What's at work in the heads of all these workers? Simple, barked one boss way back in 1894. Nobody wants to work. And here's an anti-New Deal baron in 1940 snorting that trouble is everybody is on relief or a pension. Nobody wants to work. Then in 52 came the same refrain. Everybody is, quote, too damn lazy and nobody wants to work anymore. Year after year, the exact same wail is repeated from on high, including this group gripe expressed in a corporate survey this year. 1 in 5 executive leaders agree that no one wants to work. Given the historic continuum of executive suite disdain for working stiffs, it's no surprise that the top dogs are blaming sluggish workers for today's rampant job dissatisfaction. But it's both hilarious and pathetic that high-dollar bosses are so inept at employee relations that they can't keep the rank and file on the job, much less happy. Their response has been to put a silly Band-Aid on this serious problem. They've created new executive positions like Chief People Officer and hired consulting firms with such names as Woohoo and Happy Limited to come up with treats, trinkets, and gimmicks trying to make the workplace a playscape. Beer tastings, ping-pong games, meditation, a Lizzo concert, company water bottles, wine Wednesdays. This is Jim Hightower saying, memo to CEOs, try decent pay and benefits, rational scheduling, meaningful goals, and personal respect. In a word, dignity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, got an email during the break that caught my attention. This is one of those, and I get this occasionally, especially right around anniversary time. And as I said at the beginning of the show, 17 years since we began this little program. Labor Day 2005, we kicked off with just the idea of adding some balance to the talk radio airwaves, of giving people another thought, giving a working class perspective that isn't and hasn't been in the mainstream media, at least in my lifetime. It was better, years and years ago, I think, a little bit. but maybe it was just not so anti-worker when I remember growing up younger. But back in 2005, we began with the idea of coming out and talking about worker issues from a worker's perspective. So I found it interesting that Brian from Chicago, listening on WCPT AM 820, one of our radio affiliates there in Chicago, sent us an email. And thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. And all the folks who email us, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all of them eventually, especially the crazy ones. This one, not crazy. He says, look, I stumbled across you on the dial and heard your opening. Sounds like you've never worked a day in your life. Those of us who get up every day and produce know that's what struggle is and how hard it is and how hard it's gotten because of Democrat inflation and trade deals. It's been Democrats and their Wall Street money who have ruined this country. If you were a real working stiff like the rest of us, you'd know that. It's easy talking on the radio for 17 years. Oh, Brian, if you only knew, if you only knew, 17 years. And look, I've loved all of the time that we've done that. We've done some really incredible things. We've got to meet really incredible people and just amazing stuff. We've done food drives and labor history tours and civil rights tours, and we've done just all kinds of stuff and got stuff planned coming up in the coming months in some of our listening areas. With a partnership with Greg Palast, as we're going to be, taking his movie and bringing listeners around the country together to view that and talk about voting rights. But, to Brian's point, it's interesting because I get this quite often. Yeah, you talk about working people issues, but are you really? And the reality is, I work 40, 50 hours a week for a trucking company. That's how I put a roof over the kids' head. That's how I feed the family. That's the reality. This is a passion. This is a love. This is my activism. This is how I react to a nation that I love under attack. This is how I react to a future for my children being less than what I grew up in. And I talk about my experience quite often, Brian. If you've just stumbled across us, if you just came across us, and really, if you just were and happened upon the program, and in that little brief moment made the grand decision that I've never worked a day in my life, based on what you heard for a couple minutes at the beginning, you're a better, more insightful person than I think I or anyone else can possibly be. Maybe you got a crystal ball we don't know about. Just saying. But I do find it interesting. In the email, the division, and this is the part that I find really, really interesting. If you were a real working person, you'd know instinctively, viscerally, that it's those Democrats. It's their fault. It's all the Democrats. When the reality is it's both parties, really. Republicans did it with some help from Democrats. It's true. He points out trade deals. Hello. Brian, if you've listened for anything longer than just the opening, and I think listeners who have listened to this program for a while get it, I beat Democrats up over bad trade deals for all 17 years, actually. It was one of the founding principles. Bad trade deals have to go. We were firmly against the TPP and, of course, Colombia and Chorus and all of them. Panama, all of them. Because we knew what that meant. It meant working people were going to get the short end of the stick. But it's this kind of reflexive reaction that we get from people like Brian who go, well, if you're against Donald Trump, or if you're against Republicans who have brought us really bad policies, if you're against them, then you must be against us. And I'm a work. It's interesting mental gymnastics, Brian. The reality is, if you want to look at trade deals, let's take NAFTA, for instance. You can go to China back in the 70s when Nixon went first to go there to begin opening up China so that we could exploit cheap labor. That was the reason. But NAFTA, let's just take NAFTA very simply. NAFTA was birthed during the Reagan era. A free trade zone of the Americas was birthed under the Reagan administration. It was fully negotiated under George H.W. Bush. If you remember, and if you're old enough to remember the presidential election of 1992, this was the hot button issue. And yes, you had George W. Bush, who was very proud of his work of negotiating a really bad deal, and you had Bill Clinton, who said, it's ideologically what we believe, but we're going to make it better because we're going to add labor and environmental policies to it so that it will be less harmful. And then you had the guy with the giant ears going, no, giant sucking sound. We're going to lose all these jobs, giant sucking sound. And he was right. The crazy little guy with the giant ears was right about the job losses. And those of us who voted back then, had he not lost his mind, I would have voted for him. My hope at the time was we could have made the deals better by putting strong labor and environmental regulations in there. And they did. They put labor and environmental regulations in with no teeth, no enforcement ability. It was a bad deal. I was against the deal. Labor was against the deal. Most sane, rational Democrats were against it, and some Republicans, but overwhelmingly Republicans supported it, and corporate Democrats were in favor of it. So when we're talking, let's talk apples and oranges. There are bad Democrats, yes, and there used to be good Republicans. I can't find one of those today. And I want to. I wish there were. I wish there were pro-labor Republicans out there still. There just aren't. There are some who are less bad, Brian. There are some who are not as horrible. But down the line, they've all bought the party line, which is anti-working person. And if you look at the 4 years of the sainted Donald Trump, while he wasn't criming and stealing, classified documents, while he wasn't leaving them all over the tables at Mar-a-Lago, while he wasn't, doing all the things that he did during his time, what did he do actually that helped working people? Well, he cut taxes. Well, who did he cut taxes for? Did you get a tax break? I know I didn't. Most working people I know didn't. And if they did, it was pennies on the dollar compared to what our wealth class was able to pocket. Now you can go, but Rick, no. You see, this is how this works. We give the rich all the money, and then it trickles down to us because they're going to give us jobs. Has that worked? This is the part that I find, and in these discussions, I find most interesting. Because while Brian is attacking me, and Brian is attacking Democrats, he's admitting that life is hard. And this is where I think we can agree. This is where we should be coming together and going, you know what? The workplace is where we should be fighting. This is where we should be coming together and uniting and fighting together, not fighting against each other, not having these kind of pie fights. Saying, you know what? You're right. It shouldn't be this hard to put food on the table. It shouldn't be this difficult to keep a roof over our kids' head. And it certainly shouldn't be this difficult for our kids to have the opportunities that our grandparents had, that we had. Shouldn't be that hard. And we should be moving policy that's going to make it easier to do all of those things, not harder. And yet, purely policy-wise, because I've asked this question for 17 years of doing this program, what has a Republican put forth, piece of legislation, passed, and had signed in the law that solely benefited working people? What is it? Show me that one piece of legislation. Show me that Fair Labor Standards Act that Republicans passed. Show me that National Labor Relations Act bill, the NLRA Act, that gave workers the right to join and form unions. No, what they want is a national right to work law, which will break that up and make sure that workers never organize. Show me the Social Security, Medicare. Show me the things that made people's lives better. Oh, but Rick, you forgot George W. Bush's, the Americans with Disability Act. George Bush did that. And you go, okay. With overwhelming support from Democrats, it was bipartisan. Good. Great. There's your one accomplishment. That's it. And I'll give H.W. Bush that. He did move that forward. Couldn't get paid family leave through. Couldn't get that done through Clinton either. And this, again, where working people need to be coming together and stop being divided. Stop being ripped apart in these moments that take advantage of the chances that we have. And as I said back, on election night 2020, while everyone was glued to the TV, who's going to win the election, while everyone was debating over who was going to win and fighting over this and that, I was out leading a strike of 55 workers who were fighting the righteous fight for better wages, hours, working conditions. Interestingly enough, 3/4 of those people voted for Trump. It was the right fight. It's the righteous fight. And this is where I still believe this is how we can unite the country. And the politics will follow. Once we unite in the workplace and say, you know what? You, Brian, should not have to struggle if you're working 40 hours a week. We should return reward to work. We should have a tax code that rewards work and not gambling on Wall Street. The fact that our tax code is so bizarre and upside down that the wealth class of this country, who the hardest day's work that they do is moving money from one pocket to the other, they pay a lower tax rate than you, Brian, or me, or anybody else who punches a clock and works their behind off, who does what we were told you were supposed to do, show up, work hard, play by the rules, then maybe you get ahead. I hear these stories from too many folks, Brian. Too many people are struggling like you, like me, like all of us, to make ends meet. And it's the Republican Party right now that's standing in the way of any progress forward. We need major comprehensive labor law reform in the worst way to allow workers to join and form unions in a much easier way, like our grandparents' generation did. We need massive investments in healthcare. We need massive investments in education. We need even bigger investments in our infrastructure. But that's not in the interests of the grand old party. Because the G doesn't stand for grand anymore. It stands for greed. And greed for the handful. Not for you, not for me, not for working people. But I appreciate the email, appreciate the thoughts. And I do work and have, you can ask my wife. In the years that we've been married now and we've been together, well, a lot of years, I've never not worked 70 hours a week, minimum. So I hear you. I hear you struggle. This isn't a one-upmanship. It shouldn't be this hard, Brian. But I appreciate the email. And if you've got thoughts, questions, comments, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Got a couple more emails on the other side that I'd like to get to. Because, if you thought to send them, I want to get to them. Quick break, right back. Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. The Packing House Workers Organizing Committee, part of the CIO, and Armour & Company signed a master contract. This was the first such contract in the meatpacking industry. Within 2 years, 3 other major meatpackers also signed agreements with the union. By 1943, the United Packing House Workers of America represented over 60% of the country's packing house workers. 2 earlier efforts to unionize meatpackers had not been successful. The Amalgamated Meat Cutters and Butcher Workmen of North America was the first national organization dedicated to the unionization of the meat industry. Between 1900 and 1904, this union focused primarily on organizing skilled butchers. A 1904 strike proved disastrous. The meatpacking companies used African Americans and immigrant workers as strike breakers. Black workers had been barred from participation and leadership in the union. The The second wave of unionization occurred when the U.S. entered World War I, and Southern African Americans began to migrate to Chicago. The Chicago Federation of Labor began another organizing campaign in the stockyards. Many black workers were hesitant to support what they saw as the white man's union. During the 1921 strike, management again tried to thwart workers' solidarity along the lines of race. The strike failed. Many strike leaders were blacklisted for life from working in the industry. The Packing House Workers Organizing Committee recognized that they must be more inclusive in order to unite workers. The union organized both skilled and unskilled workers, and across racial and ethnic lines. When this union rebranded itself as the United Packing House Workers of America, its headquarters were in Chicago. The union's new approach to organizing resulted in the first master contract for the industry. It stands as a reminder of what true solidarity can accomplish. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, ricksmithshow.com. A couple more emails I wanted to get to. No name attached to this one. He writes, in talking about Scott Paul, who a couple of weeks ago was on talking about the trade adjustment assistance, he says, Scott is right. I may not have known about the TAA, except I was a recipient of those benefits nearly 20 years ago when my old facility closed its doors and sent us packing. I am beside myself to hear it may go away. It allowed me the option of schooling and the time to do so with my unemployment benefits intact 2 years total, he says. I looked into that, but with the extra time available from the TAA, 52 weeks instead of 26 weeks of benefits, I was able to secure my current good union job and will always be grateful to my old union, the United Steelworkers, for pushing for that designation and allowing me to become a union member again. Now, this is one of those things where the unions really fought for this. And again, why we need strong labor unions in this country. When these factories were closing up left and right, these companies, they didn't want the trade adjustment assistance. They didn't want that designation for their employees. They didn't fight for that. In fact, they went the other direction because, well, it could be costly for them. And the government, was kind of difficult in this as well because, well, it's costly. And the state governments were difficult because, hey, it's costly. And it was the unions who stepped forward and said, no, we're going to fight for this designation. We're going to fight to make sure that it's funded in these trade agreements and that our members, when this happens to them, has a chance. Now, look, I've known a bunch of people over the years who sadly had to go through this. And what it is you can get up to 2 years worth of unemployment, which generally is only about 40% of the wage that you were earning in your other job, because most unemployment systems across the country are either 40% or less. I don't know any that are much more generous than that. Also, you don't usually get health care, certainly no retirement time put into this. So this is kind of a limbo moment where you're just, hopefully getting some training and hopefully there's a job on the other end. And I'm glad it worked out for this person. I know too many people who took, the training and went and got jobs, being, nurses' aides or low-level coders, and those jobs just never really paid anywhere close to the good union jobs in manufacturing they lost. But it was something, and it was the unions who fought for it, which again, in my view, one of the reasons that we absolutely need strong labor unions. But I appreciate the email. Also, Shane sent me an email. Shane said, thanks for mentioning the importance of polio vaccine. He said, I watched my father lug around a heavy brace my entire life. He grew up on a farm in rural Wisconsin, moved to Madison and started a successful business and was a casual Republican. He said, and I'm so glad he and my father-in-law are not around to see how Trump abused this country. I know my father would have wanted me to send you this thanks, Repolio. He then says, hey, love Sarah Burris, and everyone loves Sarah Burris. But, he said, we're a retired couple, and we both enjoy your great show. Serious, humorous, factual, and informational with great guests. Hoping to send Ron Johnson packing soon. I'm hoping you send Ron Johnson packing as well, Shane. So appreciate the email. But again, the polio thing, I can't believe we're even talking about that. Honestly, cannot believe that there's anyone in this day and age who go, no, we're not going to get vaccinated. No, we're not. It's literally mind blowing to me that we've become that kind of a society, and what it is. And I saw this graph the other day, that showed high school achievement by county level, and if you put it over the map that voted for Trump and were heavily Trump areas, the reddest of the red areas, the lowest high school achievement graduation rates in the country. And you go, gee, I wonder why Donald Trump would say, yeah, I love the poorly educated, because you can show them the research, while they're sitting on the can, with their mouth open, that will get them to go, no, we don't need no stinking vaccine until it's too late. And again, this is one of those moments where you go, I used to believe, let them do what they got to do. They're the ones going to be affected. And my mind is in the point, especially on the COVID. If you're in this moment, if you're not smart enough to get yourself vaccinated, if you're not smart enough to protect yourself, you deserve whatever's coming. But I know the other side of this. I know that the more of that happens, the more it mutates, the more it finds new ways to get stronger, and then the rest of us will suffer. And oh, by the way, the rest of us get to pick up the tab. The rest of us get to dig deeper into our pockets to fund, because it's interesting, none of these folks who are on death's doorstep go, nah, never mind. No, I'm just going to stay home. I made this choice, personal responsibility. I made the choice not to protect myself. I made the choice not to, wear the mask, social distance, get the vaccine, do any of the things the only things we know that you can do. I chose not to. I'm going to bear the brunt of it. No, they all run to the hospital, save me. And there are, tons of doctors and nurses who have been on social media saying that, to a person, they all, give me the vaccine now, as they're hours away from death's door. And this is where I'm hoping at some point the temperature cools. We begin to have these conversations in a sane, rational way. And the loudest voices, the ones who are saying, it's demon semen or whatever the heck they're claiming, they get drowned out and they get pushed aside. At some point, sanity and rational thought have to come back to this country, or doomed. I mean, this is one of those moments you go, if we can't find things that we want to move the country forward on, if we can't find things that we agree on, if we can't find common ground on something as important as the polio vaccine, I mean, seriously, New York, they're concerned. This gets loose in a place where, you've got a significant population that said, we don't need no stinking vaccines. And you went for, about a decade and a half now of the anti-vaxxers, organizing around the idea that, that they're stronger until it's one of their children or one of them who gets sick. Then it's, had the epiphany. It's crazy. We live in very, very bizarre times. I had a bunch more emails to get to. I appreciate folks who did send the emails. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I will get to them. I hope I have responded to as many as possible. I am getting to the rest. I hope you had a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Again, our 17th anniversary. This is kind of special to us because we weren't sure we were going to get here, but we did. If you missed any of the program, make sure you download the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, you will find ours, from Stitcher to Podbean, iTunes, iHeart, all of them. And if there's a place where we're not, let us know, and we'll make sure it gets there so that we don't miss a soul. Also, like I said, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Appreciate you being here. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.